Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing a different video again, just considering everything that's been going on this past week or the last few weeks. And this channel is about writing advice, and it's about time management skills. It's inspiration, it's education, and it's information. But I of course wanted to just address the situation that's going on right now because it just felt a bit disingenuous to carry on as per normal. Now obviously my channel, most of the information I post on my channel is evergreen information, and what that means is that it's timely. It's not going to suddenly become defunct, any of the information in any of my videos or in any of my blogs on my website. But this video will be a little bit timely, however it will also have a slant that is a little bit more evergreen. So I don't know about you guys, but while I am not panicked about the epidemic that is going on, and maybe that sounds like a bit of an oxymoron, but of course I have found it very distracting. I want to know what's going on in the world, of course for health reasons, but also for a much broader variety of reasons, because you know, if we go into lockdown, that's going to affect my work. It's going to affect my income. It affects your daily life. And even though this is not a huge inconvenience when you're a writer, it's still going to affect your life in some way. So of course you want to stay updated and you want to know if and when Australia, because obviously that's where I live, if and when we go into a lockdown as other countries have, and what that's going to look like. So the entire point of the video that I'm sharing today is to share some tips and tricks and maybe perspectives to help you to continue to stay creative and productive in a time that is incredibly distracting, and it's a little bit uncertain what's going to happen, and yeah, you get it. So here in Australia, as many other countries are doing, we are recommending that people stay home as much as possible and that they self-isolate in order to minimize chances of the coronavirus spreading. Now, of course, you can take advantage of this situation by going dark in order to get some serious writing done. Now, of course, your situation is very likely very different from my situation. If you have partners and kids, or if you just don't live alone, you're in a share house situation or something like that, then I can appreciate that going dark might be actually a little bit difficult. So what do I mean by saying going dark? This is the same sort of principle that a lot of companies use over holiday seasons, when they basically shut down in order to give all of their employees a break from the regular job routine. By going dark in order to write, what I mean is you are literally going to make writing your top priority for the bulk of your time, however many days you want to dedicate to it. Another way to think of this is as like running your own writing retreat, but from home. Now, obviously, you're going to have to create some boundaries around this. If you do live with other people, you have kids in particular, this could be challenging, but I'm sure you are intelligent enough to kind of create a solution around that if you want to. But here are some of the general tips and tricks I recommend doing if you want to host your own author retreat at home during the shutdown time, or at any time during the year. You don't have to wait until the government tells you to self-isolate. You can actually do this retreat, of course, at any time, whenever there's a deadline looming, or when life in general has just been feeling really frantic and you haven't been able to make time for writing, then this could actually be a really good solution. Because let's be honest, it's really easy to not write. It's really easy to just lose our time doing the daily activities, doing the daily grind, and to just put writing off to the side, especially if it's not your main source of income and it's just a passion hobby. But if you do decide to go dark or host your own writing retreat at home, here's some things you can do to really set yourself up right in the beginning. Number one, I definitely recommend taking care of any domestic chores that will need doing and that may become a source of distraction during your writing retreat, your self-guided writing retreat. So that would include, doing any laundry that you have to do, clean the bathroom, do the floors, dust, just listen to some music while you're doing this, or a really good writing podcast, and just get it done so that then doesn't become a source of distraction while you're doing your retreat. The last thing I want you to do is fall down the dark, dark pit of procrastinating when you could be working on your novel. If you have any pets, for example, a dog, I highly recommend that you take said dog for a really, really long walk, maybe a bushwalk outside or something like that, so that then hopefully you get a little bit more leeway during your writing time. Though admittedly, I do also feel like you don't have to do 12 hours a day of writing, though you can if you want to. And maybe reserving daily walks with your hound could actually be a kind of nice balance when you're hosting your own writing retreat. The next thing I recommend is figuring out where in the house you're going to be doing the most of your writing. For example, my office is actually in a sunroom, so I can't lock myself in here. There's a two-way entry. Actually, the whole house, every room feeds into another room. It's pretty cool in that way, but it also means that I can't lock myself in my office. So if I wanted to do deep focus and deep concentration, then I might actually consider moving into another room where I can close all of the doors, and it's just that almost like a mental barrier. You're sealing yourself in, and it communicates to other people that you do not want to be disturbed. And this is something Carl Newport actually talks about in his book, Deep Work, how the anticipation of being interrupted is just as bad as being interrupted. If you anticipate interruption, then you never allow yourself to get down into that state of deep work. So for this reason, it's actually really valuable to try and communicate to the people around you, okay, I'm going into my office, or I'm going into the lounge room, the bedroom, the closet, whatever, for 5 hours, and do not knock on the door unless the house is on fire, or if there's a legitimate emergency and it needs to be handled. Otherwise, don't talk to me. So once you've got your environment set up, then of course I do recommend that you consider what kind of food you'll need over the weekend so that you don't have to go grocery shopping. I mean, obviously, literally right now, grocery shopping is super fun, but after all this madhouse is over, I just want you to avoid going to the grocery shop in general, because I really want you to stay in the headspace of creating your work and of writing your novel. So I believe the day before you host your self-run retreat, that you go out and you do your groceries and that you plan ahead for your meals for the week. If you're super organized, you could even do some meal prep the day before your writing retreat so that you don't even have to cook. You can just heat up a huge pot of beans or soup or whatever your jam is. And of course, you should also consider having very healthy snacks on hand and lots of coffee and tea or herbal tea, whatever it is that your preferred beverage is. Now let's talk about some logistical things. So when you're actually in your room doing the writing, it's really important that you turn off the internet, especially during times right now or any other times in the future where, say, maybe a global event is very distracting. I want you to make some rules around your internet usage. Maybe you only read the news once or twice a day, and it's really important that you put a cap on how much time you spend engaging with the news. For me personally, I would recommend avoiding TV news because it is highly sensationalized, but I have included some sources to websites below that are not sensationalized news. It's just the facts, and that's the BBC, The Guardian, and The Conversation. I've also put a link to a really interesting podcast interview with a scientist and nutritionist, Karen Hurd, and her take on the coronavirus epidemic. So you might also be interested in listening to that. However, in general, I want you to have some pretty strict rules around your internet usage, because in general, the internet can be highly distracting and not necessarily a useful tool when you're trying to disappear into your story and just get some solid writing done. So I recommend turning off your Wi-Fi. And if you can't turn off your Wi-Fi because maybe you're revising your novel and you actually do need to check facts, then I do recommend closing the social media accounts and closing your email accounts and only having Google open so that you can fact check things as you're going through your revision. The other thing I recommend is putting your phone away. Don't just have it on the desk, because that's just, you're going to get interrupted. Like, let's be honest, you'll be interrupted, you'll be distracted, you'll be far more likely to pick it up and start scrolling if and when the writing starts to get hard. I actually wrote a really good blog post, if I do say so myself, on this very topic about this distraction and how to create in the age of distraction. So I'll link that below as well. So put your phone away, put it on silent or on night mode or airplane mode, and put it in a drawer so that you can't even see it and you can't touch it. You might also want to consider working to a timer method, especially since you'll be working for a much longer period of time than maybe you're used to. On average, humans can have sustained concentration for about 4 hours, and I'm talking about deep concentration. Now, even across those 4 hours, you do need to include breaks to avoid mental fatigue. So I recommend either doing 25 minutes with a 10-minute break or a 5-minute break, or 45 minutes with a 10 to 15-minute break. Now, of course, you can actually extend this focus time if you are well practiced in this kind of deep focus, deep work practice. You can extend it to 8 or 9 hours, but again, you do need to have frequent breaks in order to not get that mental fatigue. Now, even if you are a discovery writer, I do recommend that you don't just sit down, open a Word document and go, okay, what am I going to write now? Because that's a pretty good way to just pick up your phone and start scrolling, because you know how to scroll and you don't know what you want to write. So what I recommend instead is, if you don't have a current work in progress happening, you could either engage in writing exercise activities using books such as Natalie Goldberg's Wild Mind or Writing Down the Bones. Those are two really fantastic writing exercise books. You could practice journaling. You could do any creative writing prompt that you find online. Here's some of my favorites, actually. You have 24 hours left to live. I remember. She opened the lid. So there you go. There's 3 prompts to get you started. But if you do have a long-term writing project that you're currently working on, I do recommend sitting down and even just spending 5 minutes outlining what scene you're going to write next, or even creating a mini plan for this day specifically. So maybe if you're in the revision process, you might revise 1 chapter, or you might revise 1 aspect of several chapters. So you might be focusing on character development or plot holes across these 3 chapters, or across the novel as a whole, depending on the element that you're actually revising. But making these kind of plans create a container for the day. You know what you're going to do, you have a direction, and it really stops that temptation to reach for other forms of distraction like procrastinating or scrolling on the internet. Now, you don't have to take on this practice specifically, but I feel like it can be really useful on those days when you're having to white knuckle through the writing, and that's having mini rewards. So if this kind of practice really works for you, you could make a rule such as, I'm going to write for 45 minutes, and then my little reward at the end of that is going for a walk around the block, or it's going out and talking to my partner for 15 minutes, or maybe it's watching a video on YouTube or listening to a snippet of a podcast. Obviously, it's really great if you can pick a reward that is supportive to your creative practice, but sometimes it's actually even more beneficial to do something during your break that is completely different to your writing activity. So if you're working on a crime novel, don't then, in your break, spend 15 minutes brainstorming the next scene or thinking about the scene you just finished or reading a crime book. Those kind of things don't give your brain the break that it actually needs in order to return to the work refreshed. But if you were to say, get up and go and read the newspaper and read an article about something that has nothing to do with crime, then that actually does give your brain a break and it's able to focus on something else for 5 or 10 minutes. If you go and talk to your partner about what you're going to have for dinner that night, again, that's giving your mind an actual break. But again, you need to know you, and you need to create your own rules around this sort of thing. Would a reward system work for you? Would that be an extra motivation? Or do you sort of take the leaning of, I'm an adult and I don't need rewards? In which case, you're totally wrong. While you're engaging in this self-run writing retreat, I do recommend that you have some things on hand that can be sources of inspiration when maybe things get a little tough. So this could be rewatching snippets of really inspiring interviews with authors that you admire. Or maybe it could be reading a craft development book that has always been a touchstone for you. Or maybe it could be a fiction book whose style you also want to emulate, or who's trying to do things you're trying to do in your book. Or if you're a little bit afraid of maybe then copying or being too informed by reading fiction, you could read something that's actually completely different to what you're writing. You need to know you need to know what kind of a writer you are. But I do recommend having these kind of sources of inspiration at hand, especially when you say get into hour 3, 4, or 5 and all of your motivation and inspiration has disappeared and you're just left with the work. So there you have it, guys. Those are some of my tips and tricks for hosting your own self-writing retreat or going dark during this shutdown time. But again, remember, you can run this kind of retreat whenever you want. And part of the reason why I made this video is because I find the idea of attending a writing retreat just like really luxurious and exciting. But of course, I can't afford that. But you can totally afford to run your own at home. And yes, I know it can be a little bit isolating, but that's where you can reach out to online communities during your break time or when you've finished writing as a way to connect with other creative people. There you have it, guys. I know today was a bit of a different video, but I also want you to know that I haven't released a written blog for this week. I only have this particular video uploaded. But I'd love to hear from you guys what you thought of this video, if any of these tips were really useful, and how you're doing with everything that's going on. Are you feeling really distracted? Are you finding it difficult to write fiction during a time of such uncertainty? Please leave a comment below, or of course you can also email me. And if you'd like even more writing advice, you can head to my website, taraeast.com. I have over 150 writing advice blogs on the website, so there's plenty of reading material. While you're there, you can also join my newsletter. And when you do, I'll send you a downloadable cheat sheet. And that's called The 7 Ways to Stay Motivated as a Writer. It's a simple one-page cheat sheet. You can print it out and stick it wherever you need it for those little moments when some more inspiration is needed. Gotta say, it's a pretty good thing to have around when you're hosting your own writing retreat at home. And if you're looking for a little bit of escapism or entertainment during this time, my crime novel, mystery novel, Every Time He Dies, is available right now everywhere online. I'm pretty sure the ebook is like $4, so get on that. Well, that's all I've got for you this week, guys. Stay safe, stay calm, and please get some writing done. And I'll see you again next week.